Hello everyone and welcome to the Evangelist Nick Garrett channel. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. Today we are talking about the Third Crusade to the Holy Land. In 1187 AD, Pope Gregory VIII issued the papal bull Audita Tremendi. He asked the Crusaders to organize and head to the Holy Land to defeat Saladin, who had taken Jerusalem. Richard the Lionheart of England, one of the Crusade era's more recognizable figures, and King Philip II of France were the first to take up the cross. Frederick I Barbarossa also took up the cross, however, he would take a different route than his contemporaries to the Holy Land. There was great speculation about his true motives because of his antagonistic behavior in Western Europe. There is no question that he would have loved to be the emperor of an entire Roman Empire, East and West. There was little chance that would happen, but Frederick's presence, coming the old overland route through Constantinople, concerned the Eastern Emperor Isaac Comnenus sufficiently enough to compel him to make some reckless alliances with Turkish and Arab leaders. Meanwhile, between the French and English, Richard raised a much better and more supplied army than Philip, and it would show. Philip arrived in Acre in 1191 and found the king of Jerusalem, Guy de Lusignan, already besieging Saladin's forces in Acre. Adin showed few signs of worry as the Muslims made small gains against the besieging Christians by attacking their lines with hit-and-run tactics. Meanwhile, Richard's fleet departed from England with high hopes for great success. En route to the Holy Land, however, his fleet was struck by a violent storm, and several of his ships crashed along the island of Cyprus. Cyprus was firmly Byzantine land. The despot Isaac Comnenus, however, had made a treaty with Saladin. At the same time, Byzantine sources from the time indicated that Isaac was a poor intellectual leader that made impetuous decisions. It was indicative of the relations between the East and West at the time that while the royal family of the two sides were intermarrying, the leaders at the same time were making treaties with the enemies of their estranged yet heavily intermixed monarchies. Whatever the true reason, Isaac took the treaty with Saladin seriously. After the storm, the Cypriots plundered the wreckage of Richard's ships, but quickly realized they had made a mistake. In response to this effrontery, Richard landed the rest of his force and overtook the whole island nation by May that same year. Now Cyprus could be used as a staging area for supplies in the siege of Acre, as well as for any move to reclaim Crusader territory along the Mediterranean coast. Taking Cyprus could not have been better planned if they had have tried or intended to. It served a more strategic benefit and morale-boosting victory for the Crusaders than perhaps any single event in decades. Richard's response to the Cypriots under Comnenus molesting his damaged assets had been swift and decisive. His presence and early success sent a loud, clear message through the Levant. To add to the growing legend the Englishman Richard and his forces had earned prior to even arriving, the English sunk a Muslim supply ship headed for Acre on their approach to the coast. Now Saladin's forces were faced with defeat. The Muslims had no choice but to sue for terms of truce. Initially, Richard instituted the same mercy Adin had shown in Jerusalem, demanding ransom for the Muslims in the city that wished to be spared. In return for the money, Richard would free the large number of 3,000 Muslim prisoners taken defending the city during the Battle of Acre. At first, Saladin agreed, but put Richard off, asking for time to collect the money. In reality, he considered his next move. Richard, realizing what his foe was doing, pressed him. Saladin claimed difficulty in gathering the money and asked for a little more time, which may have been legitimate. A total of 3 requests went out to Adin to pay up. On 3 occasions, Salah put Richard off. Some had suggested that Saladin was resentful toward his own men who had given up Acre without his permission. Losing patience, fearing a reorganization of Muslim forces, and unable to care for so many prisoners, Richard killed each and every one of them. Undoubtedly, he wanted to send a strong statement to Saladin that his free run of the Levant was over. While this decision showed a capacity for barbaric violence, it probably went a longer way in crushing Muslim morale. Muslims notoriously respected and feared leaders who showed wisdom and ferocity, who could be merciful, but who also had the guts to slaughter one's enemies. Perhaps Richard was aware of this simple logic. As for Richard's French counterpart, Philip II, having helped to take back Acre, he determined his duty to the Crusade completed. He went back home to France, leaving the bulk of his force under the leadership of Richard. For his next campaign, Richard determined to take back Jaffa, which was an important city in that from there ran the road inland to Jerusalem. Richard perhaps had Jaffa in mind to stage equipment for the eventual siege of Jerusalem. The Crusaders began marching south along the coast road toward their next destination. Expecting the hit-and-run tactics that had plagued the men of the Second Crusade, the men marched through Syria in ready formation, shields, long spears, archers, reconnaissance, and light cavalry at the ready. When Saladin sprung his inevitable traps, he found Richard prepared and quickly deployed cavalry to meet each attack. Further, being along the coast road, Richard had the support of naval help from Acre, from Cyprus, and all along the coast. He took back city after city and town after town along the coast where he was greeted as a liberator. The legend about Richard and concern about Saladin spread further in the wake of the Crusader army that left around 7,000 of Saladin's men dead. Rumblings from Damascus that perhaps Saladin had met his effectiveness. Next, Richard took control of the town of Arsuf and attained his goal of retaking Jaffa soon thereafter. In his estimation, they were in a great position to think about retaking the jewel of the Crusader crown, Jerusalem itself. This would not be easy. In fact, the Templars and local Hospitallers felt it imprudent to retake Jerusalem because they doubted being able to hold it once Richard left. Saladin had been bruised, but as shown during the years of Baldwin IV, he was adept at rebuilding his force to continue the fight. There was no reasonable expectation among the Christians that lived in Outremer that Saladin would be down for long. Even if Richard had been able to secure Jerusalem, they wondered how long they could actually hold it. Many of them had been there when Adin took the city, still able to picture the siege engines, catapults, and sea of Muslim soldiers. How long could it be before he would descend again upon Jerusalem? A year? 2 years? Richard wisely obeyed the counsel of the Templars and Hospitallers and instead saw the benefit of creating a new Crusader state smack dab in the middle of the Fatimid land between Egypt and the desert south of Jerusalem, the city of Ashkelon. In 1192 AD, Richard moved south. He moved on the city and captured a major contingent of warriors on their way to join Saladin. Taking the city proved to be a major interruption to his supply lines. While Richard planned how he would secure for good these retaken Crusader holdings, the beleaguered Saladin began appearing arguably a bit more erratic in his military decisions. He went back and attacked the recently secured city of Jaffa yet again, hoping that Richard had not covered all his tracks, or that in their celebration of its restoration the inhabitants would not expect such a quick return of their recently deposed oppressors. His bet paid off. Saladin again captured all but the citadel in Jaffa. He attempted to restore his reputation by agreeing to allow those holding it to live if they would simply all surrender. However, Adin's weary and resentful troops had watched many of their friends killed by this cunning Englishman. They would not be controlled any longer by the word of their leader. They took to butchering the residents of Jaffa with wanton disregard for diplomacy or long-term strategy. When Richard received news that Jaffa had once again fallen, he made what amounted to an amphibious assault on the coast. He led his men himself in guerrilla formation, street-to-street fighting. His battle-hardened men cleared the city of Saladin's men. Undeterred, on August 5th, Saladin attacked Jaffa again, although now Richard had bolstered the city. After defeating Saladin's advance guard and forcing them back decisively, the Muslims formed in lines outside of Jaffa. Yet the lines of Muslim troops were frozen and afraid to attack. Crusade historian J. Stephen Roberts described what happened next. Quote, "Even as Richard rode back and forth in front of their lines, holding his lance high in the air as if to taunt them, they remained frozen." End quote. The Treaty of Ramla officially ended the Third Crusade. As a condition of the treaty, Outremer was officially recognized as the collection of sovereign Crusader states. Richard had retaken the coastal communities and gained more territory for Christendom than had initially been lost, and sued for a 3-year peace with the bruised but still highly formidable Saladin. In private, however, the Third Crusade was humiliating for Saladin. The concessions embarrassing to an Islam that had gained so much in the region, rolling back Christian victories over the previous half-century. Now, all the Christian holdings would be reorganized by treaty, and unarmed Christian pilgrims would be able to visit Jerusalem and see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in a Muslim-held city. The greatest victory of all. Thank you very, very much for listening. I look forward to talking to you next time when we begin laying the groundwork for what would be the Fourth Crusade. I would really appreciate your support by subscription to my channel. Thank you and have a wonderful day.